All right, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. It's almost the afternoon. We've got about an hour, but in Vancouver and British Columbia time, it is still the morning. So good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today for shifting from consumers to creators, Black youth in the fourth place, a conversation with Ethos Lab. My name is Harry Stanfordesio. I'm a software engineer with the Dynamics 365 team here at Microsoft Vancouver, and I'll be your moderator and host. So first, I want to acknowledge that even though we are not gathered in person together, that the land that we live and work on daily is the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I am really grateful to have the opportunity to work and learn on this territory with all of you. So we're in for a really huge treat today. Today, I'm joined by Antonia Ogundele, the founder of Ethos Labs, and which is a new Vancouver-based nonprofit that exists to empower youth to transform community and shift culture through exposing them to emerging technologies, opportunities, and experiences to create the future that they want. Ethos Lab functions as a cooperative platform where youth can connect with one another and also gain exposure to STEM. I'm also joined by Amy Nugent, the first ever executive director of Urbanarium, which is a long-standing non-for-profit that engages the Metro Vancouver community in a dialogue about conscious city building and the physical, the digital, and the social systems that cities are inherently made of. So I think everyone's on camera now, and for everyone joining us, if your camera is not on, feel free to go ahead and turn it on so that we can see your faces and welcome you all here with a wave. So since Ethos Lab's initial launch in February of 2020, that was at the time when a lot of the world was pivoting to virtual, and the organization has been partnering with Urbanarium, as well as with Microsoft Vancouver and with Active Replica, to leverage technology in some really innovative and inspiring ways to deliver on its mission in a time when efforts like this have urgently been needed. Research shows us that the participation of visible minorities in STEM fields has remained static since 2001 across North America. Although the causes for this are varied, many of them can be tied back to their experiences as young adults. In Canada, researchers have concluded that overall, visible minority youth are unable to develop a sense of belonging within STEM. And as a result, despite Black and other underrepresented youth often finding themselves targeted as customers of digital media, content, and platforms, and even the inspiration for new trends, they themselves are absent from or are poorly represented in the groups that are developing these technologies. This is a pretty critical imbalance, and Ethos Lab sees empowering youth through accessing emerging technologies and supportive community as a solution. Antonia, who's joined us, believes that by leveraging culture and community to meet our youth where they're at, in the fourth place, we can see youth shift from consumers to creators. So I'm really, really proud and excited to be joined by you in conversation here, Antonia. Can we ensure that everyone has their cameras on as well? So, Antonia, you've talked about the role that Ethos Lab has in creating a place where digital and physical spaces interact, and you also recently wrote an opinion piece for Urbanarium's online journal about the fourth place. And it really captured my imagination, but a lot of people aren't familiar with what this means. What is the fourth place?
What a great place to start. Again, thank you so much for having me here to talk about it. And I'll just say, just off the top, around Ethos Lab, we had endeavored to create a third place for young people, and I'll talk a bit about that. But what COVID highlighted, and as well as thinking about creating spaces that acknowledge the technological reality that young people are in, the fourth place stands out as a concept that actually should be named. So for those that are on the call, urban planners that might be in the room as well are familiar with the concept of the third place. And that usually is that space that's between home, which is your first place, work and school might be your second place, and then the third place is your is the place where you hang out. So it could be the pub, it could be that space you hang out on the corner. It could be anywhere where you just kind of randomly meet up with friends. It's a very organic concept. But the fourth place begins to layer on the technology piece, right? That us as you know, 21st century like individuals are operating in these spaces where the digital and physical, the online and offline are getting greater and greater merged, and COVID really highlighted the fact that there's this intersection that happens in these digital spaces. And so that's the fourth place. And then starting to think about how are these fourth places created? Who are they made for? And starting to think about how do we now influence this reality that we're actually all operating in, but haven't actually really named. And so that's how I would define the fourth place. And it's just become so much more relevant as we think about COVID and finding, using technology and leveraging technology as those spaces for connection, for creation, and for celebration. They've always kind of been there, but it's now highlighted as extremely important. But who are the creators within those different spaces? And Ethos Lab endeavors to start bringing new faces and empowering young people to be able to contribute to that.
Yeah. I think that the proposition that really resonates with me that Antonia offers in the journal entry and offers planners and communities alike is the capacity to bring intention to design. She says to act in the fourth place. Now is a moment to act in the fourth place. And that's a really exciting part of the shifts around the purposeful evolution of anti-oppression work in our cities today. So these intentional places created by young Black builders and their families and communities will address some fundamental power issues in our cities, and I think create safer places for young people to have fun and learn in.
Beautiful. Okay, let's start from the top, right? Where it all began.
Ooh.
Antonia, can you tell us about the sort of initial inspiration for Ethos Labs and its mission, and sort of maybe what the role of young people in this is, particularly racialized youth, and kind of what inspired this focus and sparked this vision for Metro Vancouver around it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I'm not only in urban planning and in emergency management or in my own career, I'm a mother to an amazing 13-year-old girl, and she asked me if she could hang out at the mall, which is the typical third place for many teenagers. And then I thought to myself, well, the mall, is that where you really want to, is that really where you want to go? Which is fine. But I started asking the question, where is that other kind of third place for young people within cities? Particularly looking at innovation spaces as third places. And these types of innovation hubs and hack spaces have been predominantly reserved for adults. So the maker labs or co-working, going with my daughter who was 13 to a space in Toronto, I asked, can she get a membership to this maker space? And they were like, no, she's under the age of 18. And with other maker labs, you need to have an adult there. So it's not a space where young people can kind of freely go into. So I saw that there was this acute issue to not being able to access those spaces. And then taking a step further, when I was trying to find programming for my daughter and thinking about these types of spaces, accessing STEM education there's some barriers associated with that, both from whether it be geography, cost, but there's this really weird network of being able to access it because you either know someone or you're in the private school system that are seeing huge investments in innovation spaces. And so knowing how open STEM and accessible STEM is, and starting to think about the emerging technology space that Vancouver holds, that it just made sense to think about creating this type of innovation space for young people. But as I think about my daughter, who's a young Black girl, it's one thing to start creating coding classes or workshops, but if it doesn't acknowledge her humanity and who she is as a Black youth, and we see in our society what happens now when you don't acknowledge the humanity of varying communities, that you end up actually just rebuilding and perpetuating the same model. So there's no surprise that there continues to be underrepresentation in STEM in STEM fields. And so looking at Vancouver and like why Vancouver, I had an understanding of the ecosystem that was here around artificial intelligence, around virtual reality, and I know that Microsoft is a huge has a huge hub here for that. That it actually made sense to think about that particular space to be in, and as well as beginning to integrate the humanity aspect to it. And so Ethos Lab really centers the humanity of the Black experience in our inclusive design process, meaning we create spaces where Black youth feel respected, protected, and reflected. And we believe in creating spaces that center this humanity. It actually creates an inclusive space for all. And so Ethos Lab is open to all young people, but it allows us to contextualize it with rich histories and backgrounds that allow us to create that diverse future that we want in STEM.
Mm-hmm. You're here.
Amen. And Amy, Urbanarium is an online platform about city making. First, we'll talk maybe a little bit about what brought you and Sonia together to work on Ethos Labs. Can you talk a little bit about that and also a little more about the role of Urbanarium in this process?
Yeah, well, and I mean about the role of digital infrastructure playing in city making is a question that I want to address, because I think that digital infrastructure allows an ongoing community engagement at a time of social distancing and isolation. Municipal engagement with residents went dark when the pandemic hit because of privacy limitations that they have to adhere to, and so they were unable to use like popular software like video conferencing, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, what have you, that makes it easy to connect with people. And so in this time working with Ethos Lab, Urbanarium created a virtual studio for urban design charrettes that convenes an amazing cohort of illustrators and facilitators to visualize the ideas and experiences of residents pertaining to urban design and architecture. So you enter the studio, you see your ideas come to life live. And then our role too, as kind of a non-biased, unpoliticized, a public entity in the city, our role is to share those ideas with decision makers. A smart city is one that democratizes planning and embraces a variety of voices and a creative process. And so I think that's a big part of the role of digital infrastructure, in our cities today. So, I mean, and now and the second part of the question, how did Antonio and I start working together? Are you ready for a little high octane slide story?
Kick it up a notch. Let's do this.
Let's do this. So I think we have the first slide up. It's been up for a while, but before we get to that, our place of meeting, Antonio and I have been friends for a while. We met a number of years ago working on a city stewardship group, the Northeast Falls Creek Stewardship Group, which is a big piece of undeveloped waterfront land in the city of Vancouver. And we were there. I was an inclusion and art rep, and Sonia was a community planner, kind of expert on sustainability. So we had different backgrounds, came there, and our job was to help ensure that the guiding principles were adhered to. Out of that experience, Hogan's Alley played a big part in that stewardship group, and we both went on to, kind of work and advocate for Hogan's Alley. But then we both started planning a family. We then had our family, and Antonia calls me up as she's working on Ethos Lab, and she hears that I got the job at Urbanarium. So I invite her into the Henricus Partners architect office that hosts the Urbanarium desk. That's the slide that's been up for a while. And so we get in there and she's like, oh my God, how did you get this job? And I'm like, oh my God, tell me about Ethos Lab. So when she describes the vision of Ethos Lab, we start talking about the Microsoft Garage. And we watch the video. You can go next slide, please. We watched the video on Sean Hunt developing the transformation mask. And I think a lot of people know about that. Next slide. Oh, there we are. So that transformation mask was kind of this intersection of art and technology. We're talking about space and technology. So we're like, we really want to, oops, where is mine? Oh. Yeah, we really want to get into the Microsoft Garage, like what a point of inspiration. So we get in touch with Chris Richards, who is a manager at the Microsoft Garage at Microsoft Vancouver, and he was super keen and hospitable. And our initial idea, next slide, please. It's us in the Microsoft Garage with some of the Africans of Microsoft and Chris and some Urbanarium people, some Ethos Lab people. So this is like the meeting of the minds there. And what we decide to do is come up with a workshop for Ethos Lab's co-creation March break camp, which was going to be a half-day experience that would involve on-site tours of both Henricus Partners architects to give the participants an idea of like like a Men in Black style architecture office. And right across the street is the beautiful Microsoft Vancouver office. So we were kind of neighbors, and it allowed Chris and I to kind of hook up really quickly and make it happen, like in a physical way. So yeah, so we were really keen on this workshop. Then the pandemic hits. So we're all at home. No one's working from the office. A couple weeks into the pandemic, Chris and I end up hooking up again over the phone, and we come up with the idea for the Urbanarium Hackathon. Ethos Lab youth take on the 4th place. Next slide. So there's the little banner that we created for the hackathon. And at the hackathon, the framing question was, how can urban design, architecture, and technology intersect in a way for youth to co-create community during this time of isolation and social distancing? Next slide, please. So here we are at the hackathon. This is some of the many bright and vibrant faces that joined, coordinators, mentors. We had mentors from the urban planning field. We had mentors from Microsoft, and we had mentors from Ethos Lab, all working together with around 22 young people. Next slide. Here's just a couple of the urban planning and architecture mentors with some participants. Next slide. And here we are, Atlantos is born. It was the winning idea of the hackathon. All the ideas were great, but the judges chose Atlantos. And so, and Atlantos is an underwater digital arena where we can meet, where young people can meet and play and watch sports. Anyway, you're going to see a little bit more about the development of Atlantos. Next slide. So we brought that initial concept into the Urbanarium studio, which I've already described to you, charrette space, to kind of get illustrators and facilitators drawing out some ideas. I think Kristen Elko's on the call here. Kristen is one of our amazing Urbanarium studio illustrators, also is our mural facilitator. Mm-hmm. So next slide. So you can see these ideas kind of coming out. Which one's that? The next slide. We had a kids and parents night. So the parents got into one breakout room and the kids got into another. And this studio workshop was about, how do you get to Atlantos anyway? It's an underwater digital arena. How are you going to get there? So this is workshopping through some of those ideas. Next slide. And next slide. Just giving you a little hit of some of the drawings and some of the people participating. Mm-hmm. Love this t-shirt. Love Black people like you love Black culture. Next slide. Yeah, this was the kids breakout section where they were figuring out the inner workings of the app. Next slide. Okay, so here we are. So one of the winning concept, or one of the prizes for the winning hackathon team was the opportunity to present their idea to Gil Kelly, General Manager of Planning, Urban Design and Sustainability at the City of Vancouver. The Vancouver Plan team wanted to hear all of the ideas on the fourth place that came out of the hackathon. So anyway, here's what Gil had to say following the presentation.
But an observation about how powerful this is for me, because you have taken this moment of great restriction in our lives, the stay at home and all the restrictions going on because of COVID, and use it as a moment to launch your imaginations and use that to transport you into a new place of your own making, your own imagination, but also a place to connect with friends and others in that kind of new world, which is really amazing. All four of those presentations did that. And, you know, when I think about it as a longtime city planner, that's what we really hope, and our best hopes to do with shaping cities, is to tap the collective imagination to create the kind of places we want to be and to share with friends and have a productive. And fulfilling and happy lives. And so this is such a powerful kind of window into the use of the imagination to create the kind of places we want to create. So I really, really appreciate this. And I'm hoping Karis and company, we can find a way to use this in Vancouver Plan. This is great. And this is exactly the cohort that we want to see help develop the plan. So I just wanted to thank you all very much for that.
Yeah, the whole Vancouver Plan team was super excited about the concepts presented that came out of the hackathon and from the members of Ethos Lab. And one planner said to me, there isn't enough futurism and imagination being put into the Vancouver Plan. So I think, you know, Ethos Lab is really kind of, you know, blowing stuff up, shifting perspectives, offering some really new ways of creating space in Vancouver and Metro Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is just so exciting. And the vision here, right, just as he was saying, is expansive in a time when all of us have been so constricted. Mm-hmm. And for this activity to begin, what a whirlwind for all of this to come together in that time, and with and yet to be so productive. So it's phenomenal.
Well, and this is only midpoint of the journey, so let's you're going to see it develop even further here. Yeah.
Right. So you walked into the Microsoft garage, right? You were looking for tips on the physical hack space itself. Thanks to COVID, we were, you know, all sort of all collaborating with you and the Ethos Labbers as a result, as one of Microsoft Vancouver's first actual virtual hackathons. Now with the goal of designing this virtual space. So that's a huge pivot.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to come back to, again, what we were endeavoring when we launched was creating physical, creative co-working spaces for young people, for them to be able to access. Again, and I think I should make very clear, the young people that were involved are between the ages of 12 to 18. And so these were a lot of the great ideas that came out of them. And so for us, when we initially conceptualized Ethos Lab, we knew that we needed to acknowledge the technological reality of young people. When young people go and hang out, they're looking at their phones, they're all sharing the YouTube, YouTube, they're all kind of around each other. They're, that's just kind of how they interact. And so how do you meet them where they're at? And we were already there in terms of, this is what should happen in terms of integrating space and technology. But what COVID did was actually accelerate us a number of years in our project plan. The vision was that we would have some sort of online platform in terms of creating a digital community in that kind of way. But because our mind was already there, it was less of a pivot and more of an acceleration into what the direction that we already needed to go. So it definitely wasn't easy. And even though it was already a top of mind, but I think that the team really did come together in confidence to be able to say, hey, you know what, let's just do it. And centering again, co-creation at the center of all of this, that I would never have come up with Atlanthos. In fact, when I heard Atlanthos, I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And so I think it's really interesting as we tell the rest of the journey, what our organization now looks like and manifests as.
Awesome. The word co-creators really seems central here. And I think that that's a great segue. Really, co-creators, creating, it's about making, it's about imagining, envisioning, and then building something that may never have existed before. And I can't think of a better moment to bring in Chris from our garage into the conversation. Chris, you worked with Ethos Lab to deliver one of Microsoft Vancouver's first ever virtual hackathons with the Ethos Labbers. Can you tell us about this experience?
Yeah, working with Ethos Labs and Urbanarium. I was introduced, Amy reached out to me from Urbanarium back in, I think, January or February. It's hard to remember now. And that was where the conversation between the garage and Urbanarium started. We talked about this concept of the fourth space and how there was this group, Ethos Labs, who was targeting how to develop this safe and technically minded environment for youth to participate, to get engaged, for a number of very good reasons. But all she had to say was, hey, it's tech and it's for youth. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, we want to be involved. So we hosted Urbanarium and Ethos Labs to come to the garage, look at the space, and we planned to have a physical hackathon. They said, yeah, we're going to bring the youth in, we're going to bring your facilitators in, we're going to bring our Microsoft experts together in March. We're going to do this physical ideation session. It's going to be fantastic. And then, of course, COVID happened, right? And at the time, it was, oh no, we're going to lose a few weeks in March. How are we going to handle it? We're going to have to reschedule. And well, you know what? Maybe we should run this thing virtually. I mean, maybe this should become an example of the paradigm that we're talking about. The fourth space is about using the digital space. Let's try it. And, luckily enough, Urbanarium and Ethos Labs were willing to experiment with us. They were willing to run the hack on the hack. Let's do a virtual hackathon, even though we're just starting this. We don't know what it's going to be like. We don't know what the experience is going to be. And they said, it's okay, let's try it out. Let's test some of the concepts. The youth are excited to participate. Let's just get in there and do it. And we did. And it was fantastic. We hacked for 3 days. We had great subject matter experts from all disciplines. We had the youth participating. We had to bring their parents in to get some of the account issues sorted out, get them signed up into the Microsoft tools. But at the end of the day, it was fantastic. And they came up with winning proposals as to what the incarnation of Ethos Labs could be representing the fourth space. And it didn't stop there. Like a great idea that had legs, we kept on working together and we kept on talking about, well, how do we evolve this? And, it went from the ideation hackathon in March and it took off again in July with the big global hackathon at Microsoft.
Awesome. Now, Antonia, you have mentioned that you have a history in disaster response. Perhaps made for the times. Do you feel like that experience influenced your ability to pivot Ethos from physical to this virtual space during a global pandemic?
Yeah, and I think just for everyone on the call, it kind of randomly came up in a conversation in terms of my background. But yeah, I've spent 15 years in emergency management, managing major events, to forest fires, to working in with Department of National Defense on emergency response. So when you are working with disasters, you're thinking about programs, plans, and infrastructure to help mitigate or prevent disasters that are happening. And in fact, actually, Ethos Lab was created seeing the impending emergency that was, Black youth in particular being a part of our digital future and builders in our digital future. And so creating a community where not only are they they're held with their diverse peers was extremely essential to actually being able to think through, how do we address this issue? So I'm also an urban planner as well. So Ethos Lab was just like the merging of kind of the different sides of my being. And so that was the question I got from some people, like, did you think about this after COVID? And the answer is that we were already there, because you can see kind of the writing on the wall, and COVID has really shown that when you do exclude members of community, there are these issues around the digital divide is very, very real in exacerbating the isolation caused by COVID. We see the inequality in access to whether it be income disparity, health impacts, all those different things around exclusion. So I think what we wanted to do was, again, Ethos Lab was this response to, hey, how do we make it, how do we actually address it earlier on, right when they're young, to start thinking about creating not only those social connections and the humanity, but also, giving them the technical skills to also make things real. So we say that we want to create creators and not consumers.
Awesome. And it didn't stop there. Once the virtual space was designed in partnership with Microsoft, then there was this opportunity for the global hackathon that came in July as a Hack for Good project. Tell us about what happened there. What were you aiming at to see kind of at the end of Hack Week?
Yeah, so we had those amazing designs that Amy shared, and we're like, hey, let's see if we can hack and build out those digital spaces. But knowing the limitations of Hack Week, that wasn't exactly plausible. But we knew that we're going to have this digital platform, and we knew that we were going to have this physical space. And so what was great was that connected with Jessica to think through how do we now create a web application that actually brings all of it together to create this one window experience into Ethos Lab.
Awesome. And we've got Jessica on the line. I would love to bring you in, Jessica, to maybe talk a little bit more about how word got over to you about this Hack for Good opportunity. And you actually led the team of Microsoft hackers who designed and planned an initial architecture for the Ethos Lab virtual platform. Can you tell us about that experience and that group?
Yes. Thank you, Ahiri. So it was actually very random. Chris from the garage, who spoke earlier in this conversation, reached out to me because I lead the Africans at Microsoft Vancouver chapter. And he said, hey, there's this, team that is trying to build out this virtual space for Black youth in the city. And as Africans at Microsoft, I mean, it was instant, right? It resonated so much with what we're trying to do. And it was such an easy idea to sell to our people. So that was how, I came into that initial meeting with Antonia and some members of her team. And it was pretty much just breaking down what could we do in this space. And if I remember correctly, at the time, it was still very much focused on that physical space and what that would look like. So maybe having people from our team going over there to lead some form of webinar or trainings in tech things, and just thinking back at how much things have grown and evolved to where we are right now. I'm so happy and proud to be a part of this story.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, you mentioned, and we saw a few photos, I think, of kind of that physical, that first physical set of collaborations. But and can you tell us a little bit more about the Blacks at Microsoft ERG? You mentioned them, and we've been hearing that come back up. How are they involved, kind of in the end with this?
Yeah. So the Africans at Microsoft is a community within the Black at Microsoft ERG, which was formed to represent the growing and diverse African community here in Microsoft and here in Vancouver. Here in Vancouver, we have about 40 members, but worldwide, upwards of 800. And beyond building ourselves to be better employees, we're very intentional about capacity building within the community. One of my favorite authors and speakers, Toni Morrison, said it best when she said, when you get those jobs that you've so brilliantly trained for, remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free someone else, right? If you have some power, you have to empower someone else. So as people in this community who are so lucky and so blessed to be where we are, mobilizing for an initiative like the Ethos Lab and Atlantos through Hack for Good was just one of the many ways that we hope to empower people and minorities in tech within the city. So through Africans at Microsoft, I obviously had that initial set of volunteers for the hackathon. But beyond that, through the garage here in Vancouver, I was able to recruit or influence people to join our team and join building up this web app / platform to enable Ethos Lab to continue their mission and their vision, the dream. So that's just about it. Yeah.
What an immense opportunity, and really a demonstration of what it looks like when we look at our own sort of more globally, our responsibilities and the fact that we truly are knit together as a community, and that it is a privilege to be able to have the capability to bring others kind of into that joint creative experience and really make our community even stronger. So thank you for that. I want to, and we'll highlight a little bit for folks who are interested in becoming more involved in activities of this sort at the end. But I want to make sure that we get the whole story here. So following the hackathon, Jessica, you and MS Van and really, that really dedicated community of Africans at Microsoft passed the baton over to Jacob, who's joining us with his team at Active Replica. And it was Active Replica, welcome Jacob, who helped build out Atlantos, the Ethos Lab virtual platform. And it sounds like it was really just in the matter of a few weeks. Can you tell us about this process?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to say thanks for having me here, and that it's been a huge privilege, again, having an opportunity to work on such an amazing and creative project like this, and meaningful, right? So really appreciate being part of the conversation. Yeah, so we've got a background in augmented and virtual reality, and recently we've been exploring accessible social spaces in virtual reality, and that's how we first started the conversation with Antonia. And one of the really exciting things here about the Atlantos project was the youth-driven creativity, right? So all of the concept art and the sketches, and then the youth ended up actually, the majority of the content in the space itself was created by the youth. And so what we did was mostly step out of the way as much as possible and did the technical tying together of the system that was necessary, but it was really wonderful to enable people who didn't necessarily currently have the skills to build a space like this to be able to have this vision and create some assets for it, and then actually see that come alive and really be super empowering that in that way. So yeah, that's a snapshot of what it looked like.
Awesome. And it sounds like one of the biggest challenges that you faced in building out this virtual Atlantos was finding avatars that were representative of Black youth. That challenge really kind of shines a light on Ethos's core mission, seeing Black youth in the development phases of emerging technology. Can you expand on that concept a little?
Yeah, absolutely. So we built Ethos on top of an open source social platform called Mozilla Hubs. And a lot of the default avatars there are things like robots and elephants and penguins, but not very many human style avatars. There are a number of third-party systems for avatar creation, but often they aren't actually as representative as we would like, obviously, and especially for the Atlanthos youth. The ones that we did find, even if they had a representative like skin color and hair and stuff like that, they always portrayed middle-aged or older people. Which again, if you're a little 13-year-old, it's so hard to get something that actually feels natural to you. And the process of building something from scratch, bespoke, is also a tricky process, right? Because you want people to feel that they're represented in the space, and when you don't see yourself represented in the space, there's a dissonance between yourself and your presence within the space, right? So what we ended up doing, and I'd love to get Antonia's input here too, is we worked with the management team at Ethos, and we decided to actually go the opposite route. And so because we were working on getting something in people's hands as quickly as possible, rather than going and falling into the uncanny valley, instead we went with a largely abstract version. And we're hoping to work with the youth to let them, as they drove the space, drive the creation of the avatar process as well. So we went with these simple geometric shapes for the youth to have in the spaces there as an platform. And then we're going to work with them to build out what they actually want to see in the space, rather than us telling them the type of face that they're going to have. So,
Yeah.
But I'd love to get some feedback from Antonia too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was, I remember Jacob saying to me, I don't feel comfortable handing over a platform where these kids don't feel are represented, right? And in a project that is like this, that is centered around the humanity of the Black experience, it really does push that conversation around representation, where I know I've been in other conversations on project scope where someone might say, oh, it's out of scope, we'll put in something in here. I think Jacob and Active Replica were operated ethically and with true intention of understanding the importance of what it means to see yourself in space, and with also talking to our board and other and members of our group, the ability for them not to just dress up an avatar, but to build an avatar is really important for them to understand those technical pieces. So when we talk about Atlanthos and them seeing themselves in there, it was really, we did 3D modeling courses so that they could put in 3D model assets in there, and even to design. So they may not have necessarily seen themselves as avatars, but it was reflected in other ways. So if you move to the next slide, you'll see that there were different pieces from the pattern that is created there, which ended up forming the carpets, to the watercolor being part of the ceiling, to some of the different pieces of art that the young people just developed so that they could dress the space. And then there's our little secret library room where actually the chairs and the table were made by one of the young people. And it's just so great to see when a young person goes inside the space and they're like, wait, I did that, and are able to show their parents that they did that. It's really powerful. And when we talk about, again, centering the humanity of the Black experience and really bringing in culture, like the floor covering is a mud cloth, and being very intentional about putting in different cultural pieces as well, to again just try and tie it back to our design mission. If you move to the next slide. This phenomenal piece was created by a 12-year-old by the name of Savion, and an experienced illustrator. And again, this comes back to our co-creation driven approach. This is called Afrofuturistic Playground, and over an intensive 10 days where Savion sketched for 16 hours in one day as well, to get these illustrations extremely powerful. And it was around the time that Chadwick Boseman had passed away, and they really wanted to honor it, honor his passing, honor the history of African history, but as well you can see the Vancouver Mountains in the background. And what my favorite part of the piece is the basketball net is all the way in the back, and that it's actually not about the sport of basketball. It's about the two people that are playing one-on-one. It's about really centering ourselves. So it was absolutely beautiful, and Savion and Jabola out of Toronto did a fantastic job on this piece. And so that's one of the murals that is found in Atlanthos. We move to the next slide. Again, another shout out to amazing community that supported us in this work. Jay Castro, who sketched out so one of the important things for young people to see in this space was sushi. Every young person was like, I need to see sushi in this space. And so he sketched out the sushi. They too also sketched out, and Active Replica has created a replication, in fact, a one-to-one of Sushi Island.
You gotta have sushi in an underwater digital arena.
Yeah. The concern again is it's still in development, but they were like vegetarian sushi. But this is so beautiful. It is what it is. The next slide. And then you can see our relationship with Urbanarium continued in bringing in the amazing sketcher of Kristen, who had a strong relationship right from the hackathon all the way to the end. It was just great to have that continuity. And so even when you see the carpets and the rugs that were sketched out, Dequa's patterns now take that space where the patterns are, but you'll see some reflections of her furniture in the space. Next slide. And then this was the gray box. This was just the beginnings of what the space could be. And you'll see on the next slide, I believe we get to really show what the fruits have been of co-creation, all the different partners coming together, and what it means to create, collaborate, and celebrate in the Ethos Lab environment called Atlanthos.
Wow. Oh, wow. So exciting. Nicely done, Jacob.
Well done, Jacob.
Gorgeous. Jacob, Amy, can you tell me about the ways that working with Ethos Lab in this first virtual hackathon shifted how you, an Active Replica, Urbanarium, think about process within your organizations?
Oh, massive shifts for us. Really quickly, the two key shifts, I guess, are working with young people and working as much as possible with the co-creation model ourselves. I mean, we learned a lot through working with Ethos Lab in this whole journey. So I told you about their studio program, which kind of came out of the Hackathon Ethos Lab experience and relationship. But the second is a civic education program that we're developing with City Hive, and this is a 101, a City 101 curriculum currently not offered in Vancouver, where K to 12 students in BC are underprepared to engage meaningfully in democratic institutions and processes that affect their daily lives. So while education curriculum may cover, the structure of provincial and federal governments, rarely do young people graduate with a yearning to become active citizens and the know-how to engage with their municipal governments. So that's a really important part of this. And what we've started doing is pulling out young people from the Ethos community to be educators and facilitators and help other young people draw their city. So we, the participants in Atlanthos development and in Ethos Lab in general, they're just becoming expert level city makers. So we're kind of bringing them into our larger conversations and wanting to kind of share their experience with young people. But it's shifted Urbanarium tremendously. Jacob?
Yeah, and on the active replica front, like Amy said, just tons of learning. One of the things that really stood out to me was the importance of actual living communities inhabiting these digital spaces, right? So many social digital spaces are filled with strangers, right? Whether that's, video games or social VR right now, or even, your social media feeds, they're often strangers. And so having a dedicated space for people who know each other to come, and the way that they spoke and engaged with each other had a type of vibrancy that you don't actually see really in the current social sphere, digital sphere, which was really fascinating. And the engagement and the creativity of the youth, right? Both just the type of things that they were thinking about was absolutely fantastic. But also, again, one of the ways that we've been able to move so quickly with Ethos on this project is the vision of Atlantos as kind of a living thing, right? It's not like it's something that's built and complete, right? It's something where it's like, okay, hey, here's a starting point. Let's see how it feels. Now let's take it this way, and let's what do the youth want to see reflected, rather than building the whole thing out ahead of time. It's more letting the community also shape the space in a really organic way is something that I'm really inspired by. And then also the last piece is that how empowering it is to the youth when they're able to actually, again, see their work reflected in the real world in this particular way. And the level of creativity is empowering, right? And so like when the act of creation is empowering, and like by doing these beautiful paintings and seeing them in the space, and by doing the 3D modeling and then having that again reflected and having all their friends and their family see it, it's something that I think has intense emotional impact.
Yeah,
it sure does. And I have to say, I think it would be hard not to be emotionally impacted by both the story of how all this came together and this vision, and having a moment to be able to walk into that Atlantos experience and that vibrancy. And really, it's a deeper, perhaps like you were talking about, engagement that I think is really only possible when we feel a sense of belonging, when we feel intentionally included, and perhaps even more so for youth who are not represented at the ballots and maybe do not feel like they have been asked to be civically engaged. So in fact, this idea of belonging and inclusion is really amplified for anyone who is a part of the youth population, which means that any members of the youth population here in Vancouver could benefit from being immersed, perhaps underwater, in Atlantos.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to quickly jump in there, but just that the young people that participated in the hackathon would not traditionally say that they were like STEM or tech people, that there were varying interests, many athletes, many just loving books, crafters, that it was their first time ever participating in a hackathon, and even communicating back, I never thought I could be a part of a hackathon, as like a first step to, I never thought I could do 3D modeling. It always seemed so hard. And I think also with the Ethos Lab team, we were learning alongside with them. So that I think also made it really fun, and seeing their parents also learning alongside, I think was really great. So it's just, there is a curiosity and a richness there that they just said, if we just give them the tools and the opportunity to do it, they will do it. And as Jacob said, get out of the way.
Yes.
Yeah, well, and even these opportunities of us all working together, when opportunities arise, providing Ethos Lab youth with more professional development, like Dequa going to the Arts Umbrella Architecture Intensive, who was, we met at the Hackathon, who was really involved in the studio process of building out the Atlantos idea, and now is is kind of being trained in different ways to think about building and space, and can apply that ongoing knowledge to the living, breathing Atlantos. So I think that that's why the friendships will stay, and when opportunities arise, just giving Ethos Lab youth opportunities to learn more so they can build more stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And Antonia, maybe you can speak a little bit more towards where you see the role of VR and virtual environments sort of evolving in the lives of Ethos Labbers as they gain some more experience collaborating, as we've seen them already doing in that world.
Yeah, no, I definitely, Jacob and I have many conversations around this, and he'll definitely speak more jumping off of this. But we do see, again, there this kind of the ubiquity of VR kind of coming, right, and that they need to be a part of being able to create and build and be in that space and see themselves in the space in a meaningful way. It's not about just having that selection of the Black avatar necessarily that makes you connect to it. It's how does the avatar move? How was it built? What is the intention around that particular being in that space? That I think Ethos Lab, in that desire to again bring humanity forth through technology, it's not only just like building those pieces, but like getting to the intention and those conversations early on in the process with young people, to be able to think about the intention of their design, and not just as Jay Pitter talks about design not being neutral. From an urban planning standpoint, design, and we know this through technology, is also not neutral, that there are biases embedded into it. And so you could also have a Black person designing the avatar, but what about like but you might a Black person who is 40 years old designing a avatar for the 12-year-old, like there's still that disconnect. And so I think as much as possible, if we can have the young people in their real lives help define their own identities, that they too also feel empowered to build into these spaces. And I think Jacob has some really great thoughts in this, or just in general around the future of AR/VR.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think, we're circling around the point, every step of the way, which again is the difference between creation versus consumption, right? And I think as a society, we're being so indoctrinated as consumers, right? And like passively letting all of the information be chosen for us, and that it's almost like an act of resistance to a certain level to realize that you can shape the world that is being created around you, and helping youth learn that as early as possible, and actually making the space for them to be creators and encouraging that, I think is a really important part of the conversation. And especially as it relates to augmented and virtual reality, where the technology is so nascent that kind of like everybody right now has a seat at the table, right? If you look at established technologies like television, for example, or Hollywood, or even the internet, they're very rigid, right? Like they might be moving, but they're only moving because the big players are making choices to move them in particular directions, right? Whereas with nascent technology that's still in this kind of like liminal stage where it's figuring out what it is, the impact that a few voices can have can actually shift the direction of the entire lifetime of the technology, right? And especially right now, while everyone has a seat at the table and while everyone has a voice, this is a very impactful time to be having these conversations, because I think we'll see impacts 10 years from now based off of the type of conversations that are happening around these tables right now. Yeah, even one slightly different example, right? But there's I see so much vocalization around the women in VR movement, right? There's a lot of women in VR groups. There's a lot of dialogue around this in a way that I don't think I've seen that in the existing technology, Silicon Valley kind of established companies. I think the fact that we're having such conversations around inclusivity right now means that 10 years from now, we're going to see a much higher percentage of representation across the spectrum within the augmented and virtual reality industry compared to some of these more traditional mediums.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for bringing us full circle on that again. So I want to just bring back, we're really talking about co-creating our city, not just in a physical space, but in this fourth place, and in shared safe places where we can interact, even in the time of major, a global pandemic. Amy, Urbanarium is a platform for dialogue about intelligent, engaged, conscious city making. When maybe folks like me think about city making in our minds, we usually tend to jump to buildings and infrastructure and transit systems. But Urbanarium understands that a city is more than just that physical structure that's making it up. So can you just kind of tell us a little bit more about how Urbanarium incorporates the fourth place, Ethos Lab, and Atlanthos into conversations about city making, and what impacts that can have on how cities and societies, and particularly Vancouver, function?
Yeah, well, I think Urbanarium really believes in the promise of cities. And, amidst the pandemic, being in a city was fraught with a lot of inequity. Neighborhoods were experiencing the pandemic in very different ways. I think the development of fourth place is really important when we think to the future and not kind of knowing what measures will be in place. And what's really important, and I think what Urbanarium is wanting to advocate for, is youth driving design. Like, planners have traditionally struggled to engage with young people. And fourth place is that intersection between first, second, and third. And Ethos Lab is really leading the conversation on these intersectional approaches and thinking about technology and space in ways that maybe cities, planners, etc., in traditional ways have not been able to kind of tap into that way of doing it. So, how can urban design, architecture, and technology intersect in a way for young people to co-create community? I think that's what we're learning right now. I think that's what the city needs to learn, and I think there's an appetite for it. So digital space is really important. And that's why we're working closely with the Vancouver Plan team of thinking about rolling out digital space within, a future 2050 version of Vancouver. Mm-hmm. Where do these places exist? How do they exist? How are they funded? How are they sustained? Is it, a community, private, earned revenue model? I think there's a lot of exploration into the embedding of these spaces within our city model, but this is kind of where Atlanthos, Ethos Lab, Jacob's work, Microsoft's work is going. So, and I think the cities have open ears, and planners and the architect community are just really excited about these advances.
I am so proud of the ways in which we are all intersecting right now, whether it was by choice or not, by COVID or by some other, happenstance meeting, that we are all intersecting. And in fact, it seems like the perfect metaphor, this fourth place, where we are, in fact, right now, right? We've created a community for a conversation, and we've invited others in. This is a safe space to discuss how we want to co-create. And in fact, right, that is an intersection. We are all in our homes. Many of us are at work, and yet we're in another place as well, right? Where we're in neither of those places, where something new can be born, and perhaps that is truly where we are all living now.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I think, Hari, too, at the same time, there's all these intersecting crises happening. There's, environmental, global calls for justice, pandemic. Like there's all these things happening as we then kind of bring things into the digital realm. Like it's very, very powerful time.
Yes. It's such a powerful time. Did you want to say something else, Antonia?
Yeah, no, I mean, just again, kind of building on that, and I really want to have that space for some questions as well, but
yes.
And then youth are part of that. Like youth are at the table, youth are feeling it, and youth are also leading those movements as well. But also creating those opportunities, or giving them the tools, equipment, whatever it might be, the space to be able to fully make the changes that they would like to see in the future as well. So young people need, they know this, a seat at the table. I mean, they're at the table. They're actually waiting for us to just kind of, again, get out of the way. I've spoken to my daughter about this, and this is a bit off script in what we're doing, but I've talked to her about this, and we were having dinner together, and you know, she said to me, just out of the blue, as I'm sure if anyone has a teenager or a tween, just kind of out of the blue, what do you guys think that we're going to do differently that you couldn't do yourselves? Like, every time we always say, like, kids are the future, they're going to bring change and all these different things. She's like, well, why aren't you also doing it? Like, I don't understand, you know? And so they're seeing our behavior as adults, and truly operate from the space of like, I want to do something about it, and I'm going to do something about it. So I always just find it interesting that a lot of times we ask ourselves if kids are ready, and whether or not they actually want to do these different things. I think it's just a matter of just creating those opportunities for the imagination to flourish, and things like Ethos come out of nowhere that I would have never imagined as a parent, and as an organization as well. An underwater arena, like that's
Sushi Island.
Sushi Island.
But vegetarian sushi, because that could offend fishes. I'll be honest, you know, if I were a fish and I'm seeing some sushi, it might disturb me. We are truly, this is an incredible opportunity to talk about all of those intersections, and Antonia, I just want to acknowledge what you're expressing is something that I think a lot of parents in Vancouver are feeling and thinking about, and individuals who are like me, folks at Microsoft. We are at a multi-generational tipping point. Our Earth is telling us that we are at a tipping point. Our technology has brought us to the brink of being able to actually invite all voices into the room and redefine who we are. The democratization and you know of access to these things, the barriers of entry going down, costs coming down, has been really just within the period of our lifetimes. And so it's remarkable how we've come to this kind of critical point together, and what an opportunity for us to begin to imagine how we can build our future collectively, and build a future where our children can thrive, which is what, honestly, this is that is why this is so exciting for me personally, coming to Canada and having a vision of thriving, not just myself, but multi-generationally, coming from the US to this country, and being able to spark and be involved in community building that can sustain my children, their children, and future generations in a supportive community environment. So I that was my departure for the moment, right? That was my personal moment, and I hope we'll continue to bring our stories into this arena. And I also want to really invite the Microsoft community that perhaps I'm representing a bit of, but we're all sort of in this together. We are at a moment where we can envision what it looks like to invest, just like Jacob is saying. You know, there are moments where 50 people pushing now is worth 5,000 people pushing when the status quo is already established. Mm-hmm. And so empowering through ownership and creation of space, relationship, investing in this, these are the opportunities that we have in this moment. And so we can hopefully circle back, but right now I'm just going to go on and say it is October, and it is a time at Microsoft where we are actually given power thrusters. We're given these wonderful jet thrusters for the investments that we want to make in creating the world and the community that we want to make. And it's called the Give campaign. And I'm thrilled that it's been a lot of work up to this point, but at this very moment, organizations like Ethos Labs are on our Give campaign, meaning that Microsoft will double all of our employees' contributions to the efforts that are taking place to build our community in the ways that we envision. So I just want to invite anyone who is a Microsoft employee who has been perhaps distracted, but at the same time, as being sort of in our own world, there is so much shifting around us, and this is the time to grab onto it and go for the ride along with all of us. And the way to do that is to participate, to engage. So go on to the Give campaign website. There's a slide that'll come up to kind of link you over to how to donate and how to learn more. And I think that we're going to stick some links in the chat as well. Take action on those, and also, take a moment to really review your own needs. Where can, if you have a teen, is Atlanthos an environment where you can see them thriving, where you can see them being able to take advantage of a sense of belonging and perhaps a sense of being able to create the world that they want to live in? That's truly what we're all doing together right now. So I really would encourage folks to visit those and to continue also to engage with Microsoft's ERGs like Africans at Microsoft, who are already just staying up to date and engaged with opportunities like this sort of on your behalf. So make sure to stay on these mailing lists, reach out to Jessica Udo, and I think that we can also put some information in the text thread for the messages on this meeting so that people can go on and join those mailing lists and keep up to date on what's going on. So just kind of in circling back, I think we've got about 15 minutes. If people want to be posting some additional questions for Q&A into the chat, that's perfectly fine. And we'll see if we have a little bit of time to answer them. At this stage, I just really want to welcome kind of a moment of reckoning. I am just genuinely so thrilled to be at this bridge point with you all, and I feel like really. Antonia, you're bringing your personal experience into this, but all of us are interconnected by a web of relationships that we get the opportunity to lean into right now, and I feel like that's what's happening. Microsoft, Chris in the garage, Amy, you and Urbanarium, Jacob, you and your fantastic professional skills and vision. That we're really leaning into something special. So I also want to honestly give an opportunity for sort of closing notes and thoughts that perhaps Antonia, you or Amy would like to bring into the space to close us out.
Yeah, I mean, again, thank you so much for this conversation. All of this happening on the backdrop of COVID, with a predominantly Black youth membership, with what's happened just around with George Floyd. It was really intense and emotional good work that we did. And so I just want to leave, we want to leave with a quote from one of the parents and her daughter. I'll let Amy go first to share what one of the young people shared about being a part of Ethos Lab.
All right, so this was written from Ethos Lab member. Ethos Lab has fostered resilience by helping youth to connect through COVID. It brings focus away from traumatic reality to making friendships, solving problems, and bringing the solutions back to our everyday lives. Some people say, I want life to be like it was last year. Well, do we really want that? How about we start building a whole new normal, accepting all people who love, not hate?
Yeah, and that was a 13-year-old quote from a 13-year-old who's part of Ethos Lab, who's just a phenomenal person. And this is a quote from her mother. Ethos was EB's, I'm anonymizing, lifeline during the COVID school lockdown and the odd summer that has followed. Not only did she learn new STEM skills, but she grew in confidence immeasurably. EB saw herself represented and welcomed as she immersed herself in the warm, diverse Ethos Lab online community. Furthermore, she has been truly inspired to truly dream big by the Black excellence she has witnessed in the leadership role models. I feel emotional when I think about what Ethos Lab has done for EB. As Akuswa Dardane Edwards wrote, if you cannot see it, you will not be it. This work is so important. And so what I'd like to share with everyone is that if people want, if you are a parent and you have a teen that is interested in just trying new things, interested in culture, interested in learning STEM, we kind of fuse the two together to gain access to Atlanthos, our workshops, our physical space. We're growing our community. So they can go to www.ethoslab.space/join, and they can stay abreast to all the things that are happening. While we were developing Atlanthos, we ran over 25 other workshops on sustainability, the science of sound, AI coding workshops. We did the sketching sessions. We did just a whole basketball sport, like it was across the board, just to be able to continue to build and bridge a community of young people that are open to, as we're saying, hack their lives. You know, think about all the different ways and avenues that they can go. So again, www.ethoslab.space/join, and we'd love to see your young people out at our weekly sessions.
Thank you so much. Antonia, thank you. Amy, thank you. Jacob, thank you. Jessica, thank you, Chris. And this has been absolutely remarkable and inspiring. And I'm so looking forward to what we are all going to build together in the future. This is just the beginning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much as well. I'm excited for questions if we have a few moments.
Yeah, I'm looking at my hints from Kia, and I'm not seeing any questions. We must have really covered a good amount of ground.
We did.
Beautiful. And of course, you've got the follow-up links, the Ethos Labs join link. Please don't hesitate to follow up with any questions. The Ethos Lab website also does have a volunteer link. I think that you can get there by hitting learn more, and continue to engage with us in this co-creation opportunity. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a beautiful weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you.